Story 1, The Bell Witch. In the early 19th century, the small town of Adams, Tennessee, seemed like a peaceful place, where hard work on the farms filled the days of its residents. However, tranquility was shattered when the Bell family, well known and respected in the community, began to experience terrifying events on their property. The nightmare began in 1817 when John Bell, the family patriarch, saw a strange creature while walking at dusk along the boundaries of his land. It was a large animal, similar to a black dog, but with red eyes that glowed in the dark. John Bell, a rational man with few superstitions, tried to scare the creature away, but it vanished into the shadows before he could take a second step. In the days that followed, the farm animals began to act strangely, as if they sensed the presence of something invisible. Soon, what seemed like a mere concern for the animals became a true torment for the Bell family. Footsteps echoed through the halls of the house during the early hours of the morning. Knocks on the walls, which started soft, grew violent and continuous. Furniture moved on its own, and doors opened and closed with no wind. The nights turned into endurance tests for the family, who could barely sleep. The children woke in the middle of the night, terrified, claiming to have seen shadows sneaking around the corners of the house. The torment intensified when young Betsy Bell, the youngest daughter, began to be physically attacked. She woke up with red handprints on her body, as if someone had slapped her while she slept. She screamed in pain as her hair was violently yanked, and she was thrown against the walls by an invisible force. Despair gripped the family, who sought help from neighbors and local clergy. A group of people gathered at the Bell's house for prayers, but it only seemed to enrage the entity further. Then, the presence, which had previously only manifested through sounds and movements, began to speak. A sarcastic and cruel female voice echoed through the house, claiming to be the spirit of Kate Batts, a woman who had died years before after a financial dispute with John Bell. "I am Kate," the voice said between mocking laughter, "and I have come to collect what is mine." The presence seemed to harbor a special hatred for John Bell, but also directed its fury at Betsy, the innocent young girl who appeared to be the main target of the attacks. News of the haunting spread, and curious people began to visit the Bell property to witness the phenomena. Some claimed to hear shrill laughter during the night, while others said they felt cold hands touch their shoulders even when they were alone. The situation garnered so much attention that, in 1819, General Andrew Jackson, a famous military hero and future President of the United States, decided to visit the Bell's house with a group of soldiers. He wanted to witness the truth of the stories. However, as they approached the farm, the carriage carrying the group stopped suddenly. The horses froze as if paralyzed with fear, and a mocking voice echoed in the air, "You won't leave here until I say so." After several attempts, Jackson and his men finally managed to enter the house, where they spent a night filled with inexplicable events. One soldier was violently thrown against a wall by an invisible force, and they all heard the entity's laughter clearly echoing through the dark hallways. The next morning, Jackson left the property, stating that he believed what he had seen, but he never spoke of the incident again. The attacks continued for months, and John Bell began to wither. He developed a mysterious illness that left him weak and debilitated. During the winter of 1820, his health deteriorated drastically. One morning, he was found dead in his bed, with a look of terror on his face. Beside his body was a bottle containing a dark, unknown liquid. Kate's voice echoed through the house, claiming she had poisoned John Bell and that he had finally paid for his sins. After John's death, the presence in the house began to gradually diminish. Betsy, frightened and traumatized by years of torment, broke off her engagement and left the house, vowing never to return. The property was abandoned, and over time, the story of the Bell, which became a regional legend, passed down from generation to generation. To this day, there are reports of inexplicable phenomena near the old Bell farm, and many believe that Kate's vengeful spirit still roams that land, waiting to collect new debts. Story 2, The Greenbrier Ghost. In 1897, the small town of Greenbrier, West Virginia, became the stage for one of the most intriguing and supernatural cases in American history. The story begins with the death of a young woman named Zona Hester Shue, who was only 23 when she was found dead in her home, apparently from natural causes. Her husband, Erasmus Shue, better known as Trout, was the one who found the body, and according to him, the death was sudden and unexplained. Zona had married Trout only a few months before her death. He was a man of athletic build, with a mysterious reputation and a past surrounded by rumors, but he seemed devoted to his young wife. On the day of her death, Trout acted unusually. He did not allow anyone near Zona's body and insisted on preparing her himself for the funeral. He dressed her in a high-collared dress, which many found strange, as it was uncommon for a widower to handle the preparations himself at that time. During the funeral, Trout's behavior continued to raise suspicions. He didn't let anyone get too close to the casket, keeping Zona's neck covered with a silk scarf, claiming it was her final wish. Zona's mother, Mary Jane Hester, could not accept that her daughter had died of natural causes. Something about the sudden death and Trout's suspicious behavior deeply bothered her. She began to pray every night, asking for an answer to what had really happened. 4 weeks after the death, Mary Jane claimed that Zona began to appear to her in dreams. In the first few nights, the dreams were hazy and confusing, but with each visit, her daughter's figure became clearer. Finally, Zona revealed what had happened. She was murdered by her own husband. According to the vision, Trout brutally attacked her during an argument, breaking her neck. To prove it was really her, Zona tilted her head at an impossible angle, showing her mother that her death was no accident. Convinced that it was more than just a dream, Mary Jane went to the local authorities, insisting that her daughter's body be exhumed. At first, investigators were skeptical, but Mary Jane's persistence and the rumors circulating around town persuaded them to reopen the case. When Zona's body was examined, doctors discovered that her neck was indeed broken with clear signs of strangulation. Trout Shue was arrested and put on trial. During the proceedings, Zona's mother testified, stating that her daughter's spirit had revealed the crime to her. The court was divided between skeptics and those who believed in the supernatural intervention. Despite the controversies, the physical evidence was enough, and Trout was sentenced to life imprisonment. He died a few years later in prison, taking the secret of his motives with him. Today, Zona Hester Shue's story is known as the Greenbrier ghost, and is considered the only case in the United States where a ghost's testimony was accepted as part of a trial. It is said that to this day, Zona's spirit roams the outskirts of Greenbrier, seeking justice and protection for other vulnerable young women. Some locals still claim to see a female figure on winter nights, calmly walking along the lonely roads, as if trying to tell her story to anyone willing to listen. Story 3: The Curse of Annabelle. In 1970, a young nurse named Donna received a seemingly harmless rag doll as a gift from her mother, which quickly became a beloved part of her apartment's decor. She placed it in her bedroom on her bed as a simple, colorful ornament. However, within a few weeks, strange things began to happen. The doll, which was always in the same position, was found in different places around the house. Sometimes it seemed to have only moved slightly, but other times, it was in a completely different room. Donna and her roommate, Angie, thought someone was playing a prank, but they soon realized that doors and windows were always locked. The situation became more sinister when they began finding small pieces of paper scattered around the house, with messages like "Help us" and "Save us" written in a child's handwriting they did not recognize. The discomfort grew when the doll was found one day with drops of blood on its cloth hands. Frightened, the young women decided to seek help from a medium, who performed a seance in the apartment. During the session, the medium claimed that the doll was possessed by the spirit of a young girl named Annabelle Higgins, who had died young in the area. Believing that the spirit was harmless and just seeking affection, Donna decided to keep the doll. It was a mistake she would never forget. Shortly after, Angie's fiancé, Lou, had a disturbing nightmare in which he was attacked by the doll. In the dream, Annabelle climbed onto his chest and began to strangle him. When he woke up, Lou found fresh, bloody scratch marks on his body. With fear growing, Donna finally sought the help of Ed and Lorraine Warren, famous paranormal investigators. Upon examining the doll, the Warrens quickly concluded that it was not the spirit of a child inhabiting Annabelle, but a demonic entity using the doll as a channel to get closer to humans. The Warrens took the doll, which is now kept in an occult museum under the protection of prayers and blessings. Although it is locked in a glass case, Annabelle is still believed to have the power to cause trouble. Visitors to the museum report chills and a malevolent presence when they approach the doll. In a famous case, a man mocked the doll and, upon leaving the museum, suffered a severe motorcycle accident that led to his death. Annabelle's story serves as a reminder that sometimes inanimate objects can carry forces beyond human comprehension. Story 4: The Amityville Horror House. In 1974, a tragedy shocked the small community of Amityville, New York. Ronald DeFeo Jr., a seemingly ordinary young man, brutally murdered his parents and 4 siblings while they slept in their home. He claimed to have heard voices compelling him to commit the murders. However, this story was only the beginning of the mystery that would surround the house at 112 Ocean Avenue. The following year, the Lutz family, consisting of George, Kathy, and their 3 children, moved into the house, unaware that their lives would turn into a nightmare. Only 28 days later, the Lutzes abandoned the residence, claiming that the house was possessed by a malevolent force. The events they reported are still some of the most documented cases of paranormal activity. The problems began in the first few days. George, a naturally skeptical man, began waking up every night at exactly 3:15 a.m., the time when the DeFeo murders had occurred. He also began to feel an intense cold emanating from the walls, despite the house being heated. George's behavior became more aggressive, and he isolated himself in the basement, where he felt an inexplicable attraction to the old boiler room. Kathy, on the other hand, woke up with scratch marks on her body that mysteriously disappeared throughout the day. On one occasion, she claimed to see the reflection of an aged and frightening face in the mirror instead of her own. Their children were also affected. The youngest began talking about an imaginary friend named Jody, a figure he described as a giant pig with red eyes that watched him from the window. The events escalated when the family began hearing loud noises in the early hours, like heavy footsteps descending the stairs and doors slamming. They found doors open that they had locked the night before, crucifixes turned upside down, and a sticky black liquid oozing from the walls. One night, Kathy felt something invisible grab her body, pinning her to the bed, while she was unable to move or scream. Desperate, the Lutzes sought the help of a local priest, who went to the house to perform a blessing. However, as he began to pray, he was violently attacked by an invisible force and heard a threatening voice say, "Get out." The priest fled and never returned to the house, stating that something demonic inhabited the location. The fear and inexplicable events drove the family to abandon the house in the middle of the night, leaving all their belongings behind. After the Lutzes left, an investigation was conducted, and many considered the case a hoax, accusing the family of fabricating the story for profit. However, George and Kathy always maintained their account, swearing that what they experienced in the house was real. Additionally, paranormal investigators like Ed and Lorraine Warren visited the residence and reported feeling an overwhelming malevolent presence. Lorraine, a sensitive medium, claimed that the house was built over a gateway to hell, and that the energy there was one of the most negative she had ever encountered. Today, the Amityville house remains a symbol of horror. Many believe that something truly evil resides on that land, while others see the case as an example of collective hysteria and psychological suggestion. Regardless of what really happened, the story of Amityville continues to fuel books, movies, and nightmares, serving as a dark reminder that some doors should perhaps never be opened. Story 5: The Cursed Borley Convent. In 1862, deep in rural England, a convent was built in the village of Borley, Essex. For decades, the place served as a residence for monks and nuns, but rumors of supernatural activities always surrounded the region. When the convent was decommissioned and a rectory was constructed on the site in 1863, the locals began to report encounters with what they called the ghost nun. The first family to live in the rectory was that of Reverend Henry Bull. Shortly after they moved in, they began to hear footsteps during the night, whispers without any apparent source, and objects moving on their own. One of the most frequent apparitions was that of a nun dressed in black, walking through the gardens toward the abandoned convent, disappearing at a specific spot on the grounds. The situation became even more intense when in 1929, Reverend Lionel Foister and his wife Marianne moved into the house. It was during their time that paranormal events peaked. Marianne was attacked by invisible forces, feeling cold hands grabbing her wrists and being pushed against the walls. Threatening messages appeared on the walls of the house, urging Marianne to leave. The Foisters called Harry Price, a renowned paranormal investigator, to study the residence. Price spent months at the location and documented a series of inexplicable events: bells that rang by themselves, objects levitating, and the frequent appearance of the ghost nun. He also reported seeing, on a particularly cold night, a tall, dark figure standing at the bedroom window, watching him while he slept. Price conducted a séance at the house, during which he claimed to have communicated with the spirit of a nun who had been buried alive in the convent centuries earlier as punishment for getting involved with a monk. After the Foisters left, the house remained abandoned for several years until it was destroyed by a mysterious fire in 1939, the cause of which was never identified. Even without the house, the grounds of Borley are still considered one of the most haunted places in England. Those who visit the area report hearing distant bells, seeing shadows moving among the trees, and feeling a sudden cold that cuts to the bone. The story of Borley Rectory remains one of the most studied cases of paranormal activity. Some believe that the land holds dark secrets, possibly related to the old convent, while others claim that it's all myths fueled by fear and mystery. Nonetheless, the legends about the ghost nun and the inexplicable events of Borley persist, defying time and logic and attracting ghost hunters to this day. Story 6. The Curse of the Hairy Hand. In the mid-20th century in the Brazilian state of Goiás, a frightening story became famous among the residents of a small town. They spoke of the hairy hand, a supernatural entity said to be the severed hand of a man who had been unjustly accused of a crime. The story gained momentum when a local cemetery was desecrated, and the grave of a man who allegedly died seeking revenge was found open. The terror began when objects started disappearing from houses near the cemetery, and people began to hear scratching on the walls during the early hours. Children swore they saw a hairy, dismembered hand crawling along the sidewalk. At first, adults dismissed the reports, thinking they were just children's wild imaginations. However, the accounts increased and grew more terrifying. One of the most disturbing incidents occurred when Dona Tsida, an elderly and highly respected woman in the community, woke up in the middle of the night feeling she was being watched. When she opened her eyes, she saw a grotesque hand, covered in thick hair, slowly crawling across her bedroom floor. She tried to scream, but the hand grabbed her neck. When neighbors arrived the next morning, they found Dona Tsida pale and terrified, unable to speak. The look of horror in her eyes never left, even after her death just a few weeks later. As time went on, stories about the hairy hand spread to nearby towns, and many began to avoid going out at night. Fishermen claimed that something invisible pulled their nets with enormous force, and farmers swore their crops were trampled by something they could not see. Even cattle were found with wounds that looked as if they had been made by sharp claws. The small community was divided between those who believed the vengeful spirit of a wronged man had returned and those who said it was all superstition. To try and end the terror, a group of local religious figures decided to conduct an exorcism at the cemetery. They gathered around the desecrated grave, burning candles and praying fervently. During the ritual, the candles were extinguished by a sudden, icy wind, and they all felt the earth tremble slightly beneath their feet. One of the participants, known for his bravery, claimed to have felt something grab his ankle and pull him to the ground. With a desperate scream, the group fled the site, leaving behind their tools in hopes of ending the curse. In the years that followed, the legend of the hairy hand became solidified. Even today, many believe that the severed hand continues to wander the dark nights of Goiás, seeking revenge on those who betrayed it. Some say that on full moon nights, you can hear the sound of nails scratching at doors and walls, and if you listen closely, you might see the hairy hand crawling along deserted streets, ready to punish anyone who dares to look directly at it. Story 7. The Legend of the Ropen Cave. In Papua New Guinea, deep in a dense and almost unexplored tropical forest, there is a cave that has been avoided by locals for generations. It is believed that the cave is home to a creature known as the Ropen, a winged being described as a large bat or a reptile with leathery wings, resembling a pterodactyl. The legend of the Ropen is as old as the tribe itself, and reports of sightings have spanned centuries, becoming increasingly terrifying. The first documented accounts of the cave came in the 19th century, when European explorers began venturing into the forest. Many returned speaking of a strange glow emanating from the cave at night, as if something inside it pulsed with a supernatural light. Those who dared to get closer claimed to hear strange sounds, like the flapping of giant wings and screams echoing through the darkness. One explorer reported that while camping near the cave entrance, he felt an oppressive presence and saw something resembling a flying silhouette crossing the starry sky. Local tribes who have always treated the cave with fear, say that the Ropen feeds on souls and that its spectral glow is the result of the energy of the dead it captures. The creature is described as being as large as a tree with the stench of rotting flesh. It is said that the Ropen only emerges from its cave at night, flying low over the village and carrying away anyone who dares to challenge it. One of the scariest stories is about a young woman named Laka, who decided to prove that the legend was false. She entered the cave on a full moon night and was never seen again. Only her long, agonizing screams echoed through the forest, and the light inside the cave glowed brighter than ever. Over the years, treasure hunters and explorers have tried to unravel the cave's mystery, but few have returned to tell their stories. Those who survived reported seeing bones scattered on the cave floor, remains of old bonfires, and markings on the walls that seem to tell the story of ancient sacrifices. It is believed that the site was once used for tribal rituals, where human offerings were made to the Ropen to appease its hunger and ensure the creature did not devastate the village. To this day, the Ropen Cave remains one of the most avoided places in Papua New Guinea. The surrounding forest is dense and suffocating, and only the bravest, or the most foolish, dare to approach. Yet the spectral glow that emanates from the cave continues to appear on full moon nights, like an evil beacon that draws those who cannot resist the temptation to discover what truly resides in its depths. The tribal elders warn that curiosity is a deadly trap and that those who get too close never return. It is said that the Ropen still waits patiently for the foolish souls who come too close to its forbidden lair. Story 8. The Spirit of Aokigahara Forest. In Japan, at the base of the iconic Mount Fuji, lies a dense forest known as Aokigahara, or the Sea of Trees. It is a place of stunning natural beauty but with a sinister reputation that makes it one of the most feared locations in the country. For centuries, the forest has been associated with legends of restless spirits and supernatural forces, and in modern times, it has gained notoriety as one of the most frequent sites of suicides in Japan, earning it the nickname Suicide Forest. The locals avoid entering the forest, especially after dusk. It is said that Aokigahara is haunted by uriai, vengeful spirits that manifest as dark shadows and ghostly figures. The forest is so thick that even during the day, sunlight struggles to penetrate through the canopy, creating an environment where time and space seem distorted. Many visitors report feeling an overwhelming sense of sadness and despair as soon as they enter, as if the very forest absorbs their emotions. The most frightening story circulating in the region is about a young woman who, they say, was lured into the depths of the forest by a treacherous spirit. In 1973, a search team found the body of a woman hanging from one of the oldest trees, dressed in a traditional white gown. The peculiarity of the case was that, around her, several Japanese dolls with their eyes gouged out were tied to the branches. Alongside the body were handwritten notes in which she claimed something in the forest was calling her and that she needed to find peace. Over the years, more and more people have claimed to see the spirit of a woman in a white dress wandering among the trees. Her face is never entirely visible, but those who see her feel an intense chill, followed by a crushing sadness. Some believe she is the manifestation of all the spirits who took their own lives in the forest, united as one, eternally searching for redemption. Others say it's just an urban legend, fed by fear of the unknown and the tragedy of Aokigahara. Explorers who dare to venture deeper into the forest often get lost, despite leaving colorful ribbons tied to trees to mark their path. Many times, these ribbons are found cut or moved, as if an invisible force were shifting them. One day, a photographer decided to spend the night in the forest, hoping to capture images of the paranormal phenomena so many had reported. In the early hours, he heard faint whispers and distant laughter. When reviewing his photos later, he found a disturbing image. Among the shadows, there was a female figure with long, disheveled hair staring directly at the camera. Even search teams, trained to locate those who wander into the forest, report strange events. Many hear footsteps behind them, but when they turn around, no one is there. Others feel they are being watched, as if the Uriai of the forest are closely following them, ready to attack anyone who disrespects the site. One of the most famous accounts comes from a former officer who encountered a group of figures dressed in white, floating among the trees, only to vanish without a trace. Today, Aokigahara remains a place of contradictory beauty and dark mystery. Many measures have been taken to dissuade visitors from taking their own lives there, including warning signs and regular patrols, but the feeling of unease persists. Those who venture into the sea of trees know they are treading on sacred ground, where the weight of lost souls hangs palpably in the air. They say that if you go to the forest on a foggy night and hear whispers among the trees, it's best not to respond or look back, for the spirit of the woman in the white dress may be closer than you think. Story 9. The Cecil Hotel and the Mystery of Room 1402. In Los Angeles, in the bustling area of downtown, there stands a building with a history of tragedies, mysteries, and deaths. The Cecil Hotel, opened in 1924, was once a luxurious hub for travelers and tourists, but over time, the location developed a dark reputation. Many say the hotel is cursed, and stories of suicides, murders, and paranormal phenomena surround the place to this day. The most infamous room in the hotel is Room 1402, where, according to reports, the most disturbing events have taken place. In 1954, a young woman named Mary Ellington, staying in Room 1402, jumped from the window without any apparent reason. She left behind only a note saying, "He is watching me and I must leave before it's too late." Since then, several guests who stayed in that room have reported feeling a strange presence, as if someone was watching them. In the 1980s, a guest said he woke up in the middle of the night to see a tall man in a black suit standing in the corner of the room, staring at him. When he turned on the light, the figure vanished, but the fear lingered. This incident was just one of many involving Room 1402, including furniture moving on its own, whispers in the hallway, and mysterious water stains appearing on the ceiling. The strangest story, however, occurred in 2013 when Elisa Lam, a Canadian student, was found dead in the hotel's water tank, weeks after she had disappeared. The last image of her, captured by the hotel's security cameras, showed Elisa inside the elevator behaving strangely. She was pressing several buttons, looking outside repeatedly, and appeared to be talking to someone invisible. Her death was ruled an accident, but many believe something more sinister was at play. Some claimed that the spirit of the man in the black suit, the one seen in Room 1402, was involved in the tragedy. Since Elisa's death, Room 1402 has remained empty, and many hotel visitors avoid even walking down the corridor where it is located. Staff say that the door, which should be locked, is often found ajar, with an inexplicable cold emanating from inside. It is also said that the elevator Elisa used frequently stops abruptly on the 14th floor, even when no one has pressed the button. Today, the Cecil Hotel is closed for renovations, but its story remains alive in documentaries, books, and the nightmares of those who dared to stay there. Many believe that as long as the building stands, the souls who perished there will continue to haunt its corridors and rooms, especially the infamous Room 1402. Story 10. The Curse of Eilean Lighthouse. At the end of the 19th century, one of the most mysterious maritime disappearances occurred in the Outer Hebrides, a Scottish archipelago famous for its desolate and treacherous landscapes. In 1900, 3 lighthouse keepers vanished without a trace from the small, remote island of Eilean. Their names were James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur, and the details of their final days became a sinister legend, shrouded in mystery and supernatural theories. The Eilean Lighthouse, built in 1899, was intended to guide ships navigating the region's turbulent and dangerous waters. In December 1900, a violent storm swept the coast, and for days the lighthouse remained silent, failing to emit its usual guiding light. Concerned, authorities sent a ship to check on the situation. When they arrived, the rescuers found the lighthouse empty, with no sign of the 3 men responsible for maintaining it. The lighthouse door was locked from the inside, and the clock on the wall had stopped. The kitchen table was set for a meal that had never been eaten, and the beds were unmade as if they had been left in haste. The lighthouse keeper's logbook contained entries suggesting something strange happening in the days leading up to the disappearance. Thomas Marshall, the assistant keeper, wrote about severe winds, the worst I've seen in 20 years, and mentioned that James Ducat, a man known for his calm demeanor, was extremely anxious and agitated. However, what drew the most attention was the final log entry, written by Donald MacArthur, known for his strong temperament and bravery. He mentioned that the storm had subsided and that God was above all. The entry was dated December 15, but curiously, weather records indicated that the weather in the region was calm on that date. After that entry, there were no further records, as if time itself had stopped. Theories about what happened to the keepers range from rational explanations to supernatural events. Some believe a massive wave swept the island, taking the 3 men out to sea, but this theory does not explain why the door was locked from the inside or why some of the keepers' belongings were untouched. Others suggest there was a conflict among the men that ended in tragedy, but there were no signs of struggle or blood at the scene. The most intriguing theory, however, involves the presence of something supernatural on the island. For centuries, Eilean had been considered a sacred place by locals, who believed the island housed ancestral spirits that should not be disturbed. It is said that when the lighthouse keepers settled there, they defied ancient curses and paid the price for their audacity. Witnesses claim that, on stormy nights, mysterious lights are still seen flashing from the lighthouse, even though it has been decommissioned. Accounts from sailors who sail near the island speak of voices carried by the wind, whispering names no one recognizes. Others claim to see figures of men in raincoats, standing at the cliff's edge, staring fixedly at the sea. They say that when the fog covers the island, you can hear the sound of a distant bell, as if someone were calling for help. But whenever a boat tries to approach, the figures vanish and the sound ceases, leaving only silence and the feeling that something very old and dark lurks in the shadows of the island. In the years following the disappearance, many refused to work at the lighthouse, and the few who accepted the job often reported strange and disturbing dreams, where the vanished keepers called out to them, asking to be freed. Some even claimed that while sleeping in the lighthouse, they felt the air turn icy, and the sound of footsteps could be heard climbing the spiral staircase, stopping abruptly outside their room. Today, the Eilean Lighthouse stands as a ruin, enduring the passage of time and the furious waves of the North Atlantic. Many believe the mystery of the lighthouse keepers will never be solved, and what truly happened on that stormy night will forever remain a secret of the deep. The island remains deserted, and few dare to approach, fearing that the same forces that took the 3 men still linger, waiting for new souls to drag into the depths of the sea. If you've made it this far, don't forget to smash that like button to support the channel, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay up to date with all the latest. See you in the next story.